Have you ever thought to yourself, why in the world did Extra Space start? What was the inspiration behind their ECRI strategy? One and only Rad Thad had a chance to sit down with Noah Springer. He's the Chief Strategy Officer at Extra Space, right here on the one and only Self-Storage Report. I'm your host, Chris Berg, head of really business development, land acquisition at Abernathy Development. Go out there and looking for great pieces of dirt in the great state of California. Plus, also known as your AI storage guy. With me today, I mentioned him before, co-host Rad Thad, Thaddeus Campbell, was S3 Partners. That always does not just roll off my tongue like I wish it would. So I'm going to continue to
That's
be
great.
S3 Partners, S3 Partners, S3 Partners. Now Barry and you
That's
are happy.
awesome. Barry Sherman, lucky to work with one of the best guys in the industry doing business development for self-storage and small bay flex developments around the country. I got to ask you, my friend, how many takes did it get to get that headshot that's on our opening credits where you're leaning forward looking like an absolute G? I don't know how long did it take to get that picture?
You know what? I have no idea. That it was actually really nice when I was back in Fargo. This great couple has got a great magazine, and so they wanted to do a piece on me, and so they just were taking some shots. And I'm kind of, you know how like Ronald Reagan's like the one take Ronnie right back in the day. It was
Yeah.
probably one take, bro.
Yeah, mine has got AI edited the whole facial structure. So
You got it like
speaking, yeah, I should be the AI storage guy. My headshot has to get fixed with AI. You're looking there like looking professional. I love that. Hey, we gotta listen. I wanna ask another question. You sent me something this weekend. Are we gonna actually change the name of the show? Because you decided after a SNL clip that you sent me that we should no longer be the self storage report, which I affectionately call TSSR now. You said storage homies, which I thought was hilarious. I'm going for the Blue Jackets. That's what I think should be our official name going forward. It should be Chris and Thad, the Blue Jackets. You tell me, what do we go? Are we just going to stick with the self storage report? Are we actually going to talk about news today? Should I actually talk about Noah Springer
just to
and
sum it
all
up
the
in
great
one
things?
line. Storage homies is straight fire, bro.
If anybody saw the clip on SNL this weekend, they'll know what he's talking about. And if you have a 14-year-old child at home, you'll be laughing along with us. Listen, I'm going to transition into the chance to speak with Noah Springer. It was pretty cool. I got to meet him. I didn't know who he was out at SSA. The power of relationships. Tony Artizzoni, who's a close friend of mine, a developer out of Arizona, introduced me to Noah. Come to find out, Noah had watched my podcast interview with Jason Coonan earlier this year, and Jason Coonan's been very vocally opposed to the discount strategy, ECRI policy. Noah called me on it when we met each other in Vegas, put me on the spot a little bit, like, hey, you didn't really like fight back a whole lot. And then I told him, no, I didn't. I didn't fight back. And he said, why don't you let me come on the podcast? So I had a great opportunity to have him on the Stories Behind the Door podcast. Of course, that podcast is more personal stories. And we definitely got into that with Noah Springer. But I would have been remiss if I didn't talk to him a little bit about what happened post-COVID. And he had some very interesting takes on what was going on with their pricing after COVID happened and why they were doing the increases that they were. So I'm going to play a clip for you.
In COVID, states of emergency paused everything and we couldn't do anything with pricing. We looked at that pricing and said, because that's paused, we can't necessarily push the customer to where they should be at a level that makes sense because they came in way down here years and years ago. And now we're at a point where the prices have all gone up.
One of the things Noah mentioned is that in 2018, 2019, which is something we've touched on the show, there was a lot of oversaturation in the storage market. Absent COVID in 2020 and the incredible rush to rent space that created, there was an issue in the market with some oversaturation and lease ups were going very slow. So they had some people that were in stores at very low prices. And Noah's point was, hey, once COVID came and we saw this rapid rush to rent space and we saw those rates start hiking, which we've all seen the graphs of what happened, the 63% increase in the value of the REITs during COVID. They weren't trying to do this is his words, not mine. They weren't trying to do a discount strategy and associated existing customer rate increase. They were simply trying to take people who were already in those stores and get them to what the market was dictating the prices should be in 2022, 23, 24. The thing that he talked about, Chris, which I thought was fascinating, is that Extra Space's big advantage over the market is data. They have so much data and they understand what's going on from everything they're pulling from all the other stores, that they're utilizing that data to make decisions. So I'm going to play one more clip as he talks about when I asked him, hey, you've taken a lot of flack for the ECRI and discount strategy policy.
We look at those strategies and we say, what's best for our business? And then we price appropriately based on that. We don't have a pricing or occupancy strategy. We have a revenue strategy where we can have the highest revenue. That's the most important thing.
Your take after hearing Noah Springer, CSO of Extra Space.
A few things. I mean, one, obviously that's his job, right? He's got a fiduciary responsibility to his investors, obviously, to generate as much revenue. I would say it's probably even more of a net profit strategy, NOI strategy, than even just an overall revenue strategy. Although we do see their expenses come in a little bit more than public because we have some production challenges.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes today. I'm the producer, so I'm trying to figure out how to get us to come on. Usually that happens automatically. Didn't happen so much today. So I figured it out, though. We're both on stream.
We're all
now.
good, man. It's all good. And so, I think that, hey, I understand his thesis there. I think one of the things that people haven't talked a lot about, and we're going through this experience right now on a site that we're getting ready to, break ground on, is the fact that they are lowering rates. They have been lowering rates dramatically because they're chasing occupancy. I understand that there has been a lot of movement in the housing markets. They're trying to chase occupancy. I get it. The piece that I don't hear a lot of people talking about that is, and maybe you hear this more than I do, but the fact that when you lower rates that much and then you go get a pro forma from ES or PS or an appraiser, whoever, and then you got to go to a bank to say, hey, look, we've got this site. We want to go build it. The bank's just going to look at you and go, look, this is what the rates are. You can talk to me about ECRs all you want. You can educate me, but this is what this is being appraised for. We can't give you a loan for, at X amount. Thus, I think what's an interesting, and I'm not saying they did this strategically, but it's definitely happening, where it's also beginning to limit, oncoming supply. You and I both know this game is about supply and demand. So by them chasing occupancy, lowering introductory rates, and then you start to chase out more oncoming supply because people can't get the bank financing that they want. But obviously bodes very, very well, as you just mentioned, for their revenue strategy.
Your point is so well taken. We talked about 560 deals, radius plus information in the pipeline this year versus 1,300, 1,250 in 2023 and 2024, right? 2,600 total in those 2 years, something like that, 2,700 total. So that cut, that's directly affecting why that's happening, because you can't underwrite projects in a lot of markets because the rates have been cut so much. A point I've been making for a while, one of the reasons I say if you're new in this space, to make sure you associate yourself with somebody who knows what they're doing, because the really experienced developers, I mentioned Tony Artizzoni before, Mitch Feldman, I'm very lucky to work with Barry Sherman. They have inroads with Extra Space, with CubeSmart, with those big third-party management companies, where sometimes they might be able to get some information that if you're brand new in the space, you're going to have a little harder time getting access to. So to your point, that's having a chilling effect. Now, here's the deal. Does Extra Space want that chilling effect? And that's the big question, right? And there's
100% they do. I mean, if you go to any event right now, and we've seen it multiple times now at the Newport event, where you've got people up on stage, major players within the REITs going, look, the problem is supply. Like they basically, they don't lambaste you, but it's like, hey, developers, get out of the room, go home, leave us alone, right? And again, I get it. They want to protect their assets, because the other thing that you've done a great job talking about is this consolidation aspect. And there's other people that may call it an oligopoly or monopoly with some of these REITs, right? And my point being is that, hey, if Extra Space goes and just dramatically lowers a rate on one asset in the middle of California, and they lose, or they lower their NOI a little bit, big deal, right? Because they've got 4,000 other sites that they can go and make that NOI up in other markets, where if you're a mom and pop and you've got a portfolio of 1 or even 10, you don't have that same leverage. And so it's a really intriguing game right now. And again, I think it goes back to what you and I have said. Get ready. SmartStop, $350 million in the hopper. Extra Space raising $800 million. I mean, they are very well capitalized, where if and when, which we're going to get into later in the show, regional banks have issues, some of these operators have issues, they will gladly step in and go, oh, you want to sell it to me for 50 cents on the dollar? Not a real number, but hypothetically, like, sure, I'll buy that. I'll buy that for $1. Wasn't it a movie? Remember that movie?
It's so, yeah, exactly. So interesting to your point. I asked a question, a really bad question, actually. I was like, it seems like in the last couple of years, you guys have been more interested in bridge lending than you have in acquisitions. Kind of a dumb question when they just did a $13 billion acquisition of Life Storage and they've only done $3 billion in bridge loans. And he called me on, it's kind of funny. You can go watch the full episode and see that little clip where I had to throw myself under the bus a little bit for a dumb question. The greater point is he immediately came back at that question like, no, we're still deeply into acquisitions. We still really want to own stores. But it's a very interesting, and we talked a little bit about the bridge lending program and why they did that. He said, hey, look, we identified a problem in the market where the people that we were operating for didn't have this option to help get them through lease up once their construction loan, once they got CO, the construction loans are so onerous in their terms. You don't want to be driving through reserves that quickly. So we came and we filled that place. The balance is, how do you be the lender and then also the operator of that store? And one of the things Noah said is like, hey, we consider every single extra space an extra space, whether it's company owned, whether it's a joint venture, or whether it's a third party management opportunity. And he said, look, we have to be able to operate correctly, or we wouldn't have 2,000 people choosing to have us as their third party management company. Counterpoint to that conversation is, well, one of the reasons people have you is maybe they don't necessarily trust 100% that you're working in their best interest all the time, but they get access to your data, right? They get that economy of scale that you have, the ability to have a lower advertising price because your name is so synonymous. We talked about this statistic when Extra and Life merged. They did a beta test. They left half the Life Storage stores as Life, and they took half of them and made them Extra. And the SEO on the Extra stores was like 35% higher than they were getting so much more organic reach with the Extra Space brand name. So there's an advantage there. Going to be very interesting in the next couple of years to see how that third party management piece of it plays out. There are a lot more people coming into that space. So it's going to be interesting to see if Extra Space is able to hold on to that mass that they have at this point in that market.
And I think they will. I mean, they've obviously, really engineered those structures and processes. I guess one thing I would encourage people to do is, hey, if you're going to have one of the REITs manage your stuff, just, make sure you're keeping tabs on them, right? You don't have a lot of control over it. And I would just encourage you to ensure that, hey, that algorithm, that pricing algorithm is doing what you want it to do for that particular asset. I'm just going to leave it at that. I mean, things I've heard anecdotally don't really bear weight really in a show like this, but just I would encourage guys to make sure with anything, you got to manage it. Now, real quick with you, because I know you're really good about saying, hey, I want to make sure this show is true and honest. Was it 13 billion, the Life Storage deal? Because that's a huge number. I don't remember that.
So that's the number he threw out. So you can go back and watch the interview, but yes, that was a number from Noah. So I would have to go back and look at the number. I mean, I think the stock valuation was like $132 a share. I'd have to go back and do the math, but it was a massive, massive deal. I do want to say two things. Number one, kudos to Noah Springer for agreeing to come on my podcast. He had no reason to have to do that. So for him to come on and answer questions like he did, I give him massive credit for that and massive thanks. Obviously, it was great for me to have him on. His story is incredible. Forget about, whatever you think about his answers to the discount strategy in ECRI. His personal story is worth listening to. It was very cool. Second thing I'll say about Extra Space is so many people that I'm very close with, like Tony Artizzoni, like Mitch Feldman, have nothing but amazing things. Bo Agnello, who's now the COO of of Ghost Store, it came up through Extra Space. Buddy Morgan, a developer, friend of mine out of Oklahoma City. I just had Andrew Jones from Truck Parking Club. He spent a couple years. They all have great things to say about that company. So people that work there internally rave about their what they do there. So kudos to Noah for coming on and getting up and answering questions that he could have easily avoided if he chose to.
Completely. Real quickly, you were right. So it is. I mean, 12.7, but $13 billion deal with Life Storage. And that's just a staggering number.
A guy's got a Stanford education when he can do that math while we're live on air. That is pretty special, my friend. Fear the tree.
You know what? Real quickly, since you went there, I just want to share, I had an amazing experience last week. I went back for my reunion And you hear a lot of people kind of beat up on this younger generation. I'm a big follower right now of what's happening in college sports. I think you are too, Thad, with this whole NIL deal and these young guys getting paid. And I just want to share with you. So I was really fortunate Friday morning. Andrew Luck spoke about the Stanford football program. By the way, he is incredible. I mean, we could not ask for a better ambassador for Stanford football right now. Brad Freeman, friend of mine from Fargo, North Dakota, gave $50 million to the Stanford football program. So, Brad, thank you very much for that. What I want to get at, though, is that, you hear all this conversation about NIL, and Andrew talked about when they get on the plane at times, there's a particular person on the team doing extraordinarily well with the NIL payments. He's like, guys, one of these you want to know, and I just want to give kudos to this demographic. He says every penny is invested. He goes, I'm obviously elder these guys, and just to give us some kudos about what you and I talk about here on the show, make investments, go buy Starbucks stock, not Starbucks. He's like, these guys are walking on the plane going, what about this ETF? What about this stuff? And so I just think it's awesome to hear that. Kudos to the young men that are taking advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, I saw you got a chance to get out there the end of last week. That's why we did one of the reasons we did the show early, and what an amazing opportunity to get involved in your alma mater in that way. I went to Tufts. We don't have a Div 1 football program, so I don't get to get involved quite in that level that you did. Of course, you played at Stanford, which many people may not know, but Chris was a quarterback there. So really cool to see you get involved and be able to make those inroads.
Thank you, man. I'm excited about it. So, anyways, I just want to share that because you kind of leaned into it, and I was like, hey, let's chat about this.
Absolutely glad you
Important for
did.
people to hear what's going on within the minds of young men, in my opinion.
Want to wrap up my conversation with Noah Springer. We talked about obviously SB 709 has been really top of the news, and he did talk a little bit about what was going on there from Extra Space's point of view. He did not see it as a negative, like we mentioned last week with Brett Henry from Trojan. Really kind of felt like this is not going to change a whole lot of the way that Extra Space does business there. A lot of the disclosures that are now required by law, they already had in their operating agreements. He was actually more interested from the smaller operators that there are thousands of across California, and how it's going to affect them and how they respond to that. But from a global perspective, he didn't have any problem with that bill getting passed per se. The way that it was worded, saw it as a disclosure bill, and really felt like they're already following the letter of the law.
One of the things that's fascinating, and again, you talk to a lot of people, so maybe you've heard this, but I think it's intriguing. Does anybody know? Because this whole thing started really because Senator Menjivar obviously went to go rent a space, wanted to, move back from Sacramento. Does anybody know who she rented from?
I don't know who the particular store that
That would be a
was.
really interesting investment.
We're gonna have to go back, and I think that she talked about it when we initially covered this back in May, June. I think there was a clip of her talking about it, but I don't remember if she mentioned the actual who was operating that store.
And my
We'll have to
point
do a
is, if
little
you're saying that,
research.
hey, Extra Space is already doing this disclosure piece, and she rented from an Extra Space.
Take this information as you will. My job as a journalist is to give the outlet for people to respond. And as I said, kudos to Noah Springer for coming on and having the willingness to answer those questions. Lucky that you and I got to speak last week with Cam Pactonat, managing director at DXD Capital. Thought this is a very good transition. I asked you and I asked Cam a couple of questions. One of them was about SB 709, and I thought it was very interesting. I'm going to play a clip from him about how DXD, who does as much development as anyone in the industry right now, I think they have 15 projects in their pipeline right now. So they're doing a massive amount of development deals. Asked him how it was going to affect how they're underwriting and looking at deals. Here's his answer.
We really want to see how the market reacts to this. What the data that we have today, we really utilize in-store data, we utilize Achieve data to be able to underwrite our opportunities. I would say what I would assume the shift to be is that, I think what's going to happen is we're going to underwrite these opportunities closer to web and street rate, and then maybe change our discount projections so that either you have maybe a longer lease up time and your discounts are a bit different.
So what Cam is suggesting is that, hey, we're no longer going to have these super steep discounts to force occupancy quickly. We're going to have a lower percentage discount to get people in the door, but maybe it takes us longer to do the full lease up there. He mentioned and went on to say how they're going to really pay attention to how our Extra Space and how our Public Storage, how are they changing how they go about trying to get new customers in response to this bill? So on the one hand, you have Noah Springer saying, hey, we feel like we're already sort of complying with this. On the other hand, you have Cam Pactonat, managing director, like, hey, I really got my eyes on what's going to happen. Are we all of a sudden going to be able to use web and street rates a little more intelligently to make these investment decisions, to your point earlier about the project you guys are working on in California and how it's really hard based on what you're seeing web and street rates in the local market to underwrite a project?
Before I comment first, I thought you had another clip from Noah Springer, so I was going to wait, but I just want to give you a ton of kudos, man. It was an awesome, awesome interview that Thaddeus did with Noah Springer. So I encourage you, go check out his other pod, watch the full thing. There's some great nuggets in there. And just, it's always nice. You do such a nice job of like personalizing people. So to kind of hear a story, grew up on a farm. I think a lot of people can relate to that. So just want to give you a big, big shout out, man, because it was a great get and just an outstanding interview. And we are doing something
Thank
very,
you.
yeah, of course, bro. And then we're doing something similar as Cam, like, because we're looking at this asset that I shared about earlier that now the comp is with ES, and you go to a bank and they're going to be like, sorry, right? So we are kind of saying the same thing, like, hey, we may not put a shovel in the ground as quickly and sort of see if Extra Space plays the game or not as far as what's happening because of SB 709. Thus, maybe waiting until April, hypothetically, to see where rates go. We'll see how this plays out. I mean, again, I think Extra Space has got enough leverage out there where it'll be interesting because he talked about revenue management, revenue maximization. And you go back to the supply piece, like, hey, if you can limit supply in markets like California,
you and I looked at Cerritos, right? When we played those clips a few weeks back from the city councilman in Cerritos, he used the word oligopoly, right? Because they restricted new supply. Those 4 stores were getting unbelievable rents per square foot in that city. Why? There's no new supply. There's nothing to compete with. They could charge whatever they want as long as their occupancy stays at a relatively high rate. So yeah, to your point that yes, can you understand why Extra Space and Public, those companies that are super well established, thousands of stores, would have no interest in helping to make new development easier? Certainly makes sense from protecting their shareholders.
100%. So do you have another clip of Cam or?
I have one more clip from Cam I wanted to play from him that I thought was really cool. He was talking about, and this was in regards to the Argus and SmartStop deal that happened. So I thought he had a perspective that I hadn't even thought about yet, but obviously the other big news that's happened in the last month and a half in the industry, and thought his take on what this does for him as a developer was pretty cool.
How is this going to impact our exit values on these deals? Or better yet, what markets can we go into that before maybe we didn't have the opportunity to go into for management purposes or just being able to have operational efficiencies? So when things like this take place, on the deal side, what we start to do is we start to just kind of reset. Where are these assets that are being acquired? What are the rates that have been historically what are the rates? How have they been trending? Is there any impact to them moving forward? And I would say within the next 6, 9, 12 months, we might have a handful of new markets that we're now able to go after.
Thought that was fascinating. I love the number of incredibly smart people that we're lucky enough to talk to, right? Cam says things and he says them, and I'm like, man, I've never thought that way in my life. What an amazing perspective, and how deep and in depth he gets into what he's doing. Makes perfect sense that DXD's had the success that they've had. But this idea that the SmartStop and Argus merger is all of a sudden going to open new markets, possibly because of cap rate compression, right? The more REITs there are, we've talked about SmartStop with $350 million to deploy. The more REITs there are in more markets, the more places that they can underwrite and exit at a strong cap rate, ground up development starts to make more sense. So fantastic, I thought, from Cam Pactonat. And thanks so much for, Cam, thanks so much for coming on and sharing the insights with us.
And I think next week, we're also going to introduce a new segment called How Faith Fuels Your Business. Cam was our first interview for that, so we're excited to share that with you as well. So Cam, thank you for being part of that. Great transition here. To want to remind you that if you're someone, as Thaddeus was just talking about, hey, these open markets, maybe I'm looking for great data sets to go underwrite some assets. Want to say thank you to our data partner, Tract IQ. They do an outstanding job, not just giving you data, but now also they're coming out with a new program. There's going to be a webinar coming up soon to really help you find great off-market deals, the owners, the information that you need to make some phone calls and potentially tie those assets up. and buy some really, really strong and performing assets based on, again, the information you're going to get from Tract IQ. So go check them out, tractiq.com. When you reach out to them, you can get like a free demo from them, which is really powerful to make sure, hey, this is going to give me the information I need to go out and do a good job of underwriting assets. Just tell them, hey, heard about you guys on the self-storage report. Again, go to tractiq.com. Want to talk about something here?
Noah's
Go ahead, brother.
I was just going to say, Noah's going to be speaking at the Texas SSA, the Big Ideas Conference in Austin. I think October 30th is that conference. You double check the dates, but go and say hi. If you guys get to the Texas SSA event, I'm sorry. I'm actually sad I don't get to go to that event this year. I was looking for so many friends that are going to be there that have reached out. Go say hi to Noah. Tell him you saw him on the self-storage report. Let him know.
We may have to pull Noah on the show during that time so we can get kind of a quick update on what's going on there. So hopefully I can make this thing work. But I want to share this article with you because I think it's a really intriguing thing that's happening right now. Is you and I talk about, hey, why are we bullish? Why are we bearish on self-storage? To me, this is a very bullish idea here. What's happening? We've talked a lot about housing where people just cannot afford to get new housing. That's why you see a lot of the rental rates down here in self-storage because there's just not a lot of movement. So one concept that's becoming pretty hot, this is an asset in Santa Barbara. It's happening also in the state of Washington, Oregon, the Northeast, a little bit more in Florida as well. But there's a concept around micro apartments. And you and I, again, not to dub us as the Nostradamus report, but I will dub us as the Nostradamus report. We've been talking about how the home builders, building smaller homes. We've talked about smaller apartments, multifamily units. I think this bodes really, really well for the perspective of storage, where these are going to be these micro apartments, even smaller than studios. What he's done a really nice job of, this developer, is saying, hey, Santa Barbara, because, let's be honest. I think we all know a lot of cities and counties don't love the idea of self-storage, but if you can present it with mixed use or multifamily and self-storage, I think you've got a stronger opportunity to get cities to say yes. And that's what this developer did. Santa Barbara, incredible, incredible market. So he's going to go build some micro apartments and I guess like refurbish or, reutilize a building there, and then also build, as you can see, 760 self-storage units in that market as well. So to me, very bullish for our asset class, but also I just think some very creative and great ways to go out there and add value to a community with multifamily and or self-storage.
Yeah, a couple things on the horizon that look like they're adding some actual tailwinds to self-storage, right? Things that are going on that make you think like, hey, we might start seeing some things pick up. I know you actually put a graphic in here of the 10-year treasury, which was kind of cool to see, right? That we're starting to see some movement here. I didn't think this was going to happen. The 10-year is actually below 4%. We had been tracking this since the Fed rate cut, and thinking that there was a danger that the 10-year was going to go the opposite direction, that it was going to start going up, which of course is the benchmark for mortgage rates. Nice to see this number starting to come down a little bit, hopefully opening up some more movement in the housing market, all of which is good for self-storage.
Yeah, I saw a tweet this morning. Mortgage rates hit a 3-year low. I think the 10-year at the moment of this recording just went back right around 4, maybe above 4. But point being, you start to get below that 4%, obviously a good sign. It's abundantly clear that they're obviously going to lower rates next week. Some people now are even suggesting, even the CIO from Morgan Stanley was on CNBC saying, hey, we need to probably do more than 25 bips. Don't know if that's going to happen next week, but I think we can see that happening before the end of the year. And I share all that because I do want to bring up what's coming up next week, Thaddeus, so we can bring that up and let people know. So you've got the FOMC meeting coming up the 28th and 29th of next week. Also on the 29th, you've got both Public Storage and Extra Space earnings calls. Then the 30th, CubeSmart. On the 3rd, you've got National Storage Affiliates. And then on the 5th, you've got SmartStop. And I believe, if my math is right, the 29th is a Wednesday, right? So anticipate us. We'll be talking about the FOMC meeting and then Extra Space in Public next Thursday. So we will have a jam-packed show. So be sure and join us next Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific time. I don't know, what is that, New York time? 1 o'clock, something like that?
In the important part of the world, it's 1 o'clock.
Exactly. In the money part of the world, there you go. I may be at the beach in Malibu talking about earnings reports, but that's all good.
And God bless you. I'll be here freezing.
Are you going to give a shout out to Johnson Insurance and we can wrap things up, my friend?
Would love that. I actually was on Terry Campbell, did an interview with him this morning for his podcast. So happy that Johnson Insurance has partnered with us. Terry's a titan in the industry, been in self-storage for 30 years. Every piece of this business that you could imagine started at Betco and then built Live Oak's lending platform, Copper Storage Management, where he was CEO for a long time, an owner as well as doing insurance. So reach out to Go Johnson Insurance. They'll give you a free overview, an in-depth look at your facilities, your portfolio. If it's a one-off facility, they're happy to do that for you as well. And really make sure that you understand where the gaps are in your insurance, which today, Chris, as we know, is one of the biggest pieces of protecting your NOI in self-storage. So really pleased to have Terry and his team at Johnson Insurance on board as our insurance partner.
Want to wrap things up with that. That was a great lead in, which I didn't anticipate to go here, but article in WSJ this week about how insurance impacting real estate, but also I spoke to someone in HR, Thaddeus, that this was a pretty stunning stat, like more layoffs obviously on the horizon, but she said that their insurance premiums within the company are going to be up 80% this year. Like they're looking to find another $1 million in that business to make sure they can sustain the premiums and keep the 401. Like things are just getting squeezed, and we didn't get a chance to really get into it today. We will, in the near future. Just know, or do your own homework, maybe I should say, into this 18.6-year real estate cycle that Thaddeus and I keep talking about. You look at regional banks, you look at what's happening right now in automobiles and the repos that are happening there. I mean, record numbers of repos with automobile loans. Like things are starting to crack. You may not see it personally, just know that that's on the horizon, which will take us into that mid to late 2026 time is when you and I are suggesting the possibility of things maybe not being so rosy.
Yeah, definitely things we want to touch on next week, because there's been some things happening that are starting to make you really pay attention to what we've been saying. And is it confirmation bias? It could be. Ultimately, we're going to find out if there actually is a recession. But you and I both feel very strongly about this and feel like, get ready and protect yourself and at least have your eyes open going into 2026. Because even though we mentioned some tailwinds for storage, there's some things going on that for the overall economy don't make me feel rainbows and butterflies.
Very well said.
That being said, being on the show with you every week makes me feel rainbows and butterflies. So it's all good.
Being the team here with you is definitely rainbows. Puppies and unicorns is another good one. So yeah, we got it all on the Storage Report, or otherwise known as Storage Homie. So I'm one of the Storage Homies, Chris Berg, my other Storage Homie, Thaddeus Campbell. Thank you for joining us. Please share this with your colleagues. We'll see you back here next week.
The Blue Jackets, Chris, the Blue Jackets.